sort of like 20 minutes ago. Okay, so who am I? And this is partly covered already very well. But I came to WordPress as a B2 user. So I've been around for a little while, seen some things, and in the meantime, I've worn a lot of different hats from, well, they're popping up there. That's the different things that I've been doing. I started as running a Linux advocacy website like 1999, 2000, so early 2000s, and I've been running a Linux desktop for over 2 decades now. So that's sort of my open source bent. Early 2000s, I started a WordPress site. It was a very kind of a niche site, but I just started writing for me as often do. I was writing to process a whole bunch of different things and ended up with 2,000 daily viewers. And that was a little bit of a surprise to me, but it got me into WordPress, and I kind of went away from blogging for a while, or I blogged 140 characters at a time, and we've returned a little bit to doing some long form writing as time permits now. So more recently, the Aspire Plus and Fair projects, and the day job, and still being very old school. So we're going to explore why I spent the last 12 months trying to working towards decentralizing WordPress software distribution. So before my career in IT and all things internet, I was in the general insurance industry, and I held a professional designation there. So one of the things that I learned in moving into managing IT projects and managing risk in IT is that risk management principles are fairly transferable. And obviously, the first step to managing the risk is to identify it. So we have to do more than identify risk. We have to, in some way, quantify it. So measuring risk. And in risk management, we do that in 2 ways. One is frequency. That's sort of the statistical word, how often something occurs, but think of it as probability. How likely is it? The second measure is severity, or impact. How bad could this get? So what's the worst that could happen is a good question, followed by what do we do about it? I put in some cartoon slides because it's, end of the day, I want you to stay away. So actually managing the risk starts with mitigation strategies to reduce both the probability and the impact of the, quote, bad things that could happen. So risk mitigation strategies, number one, you can make somebody else responsible, which is easier than it sounds because that's the basis of insurance and many other types of contracts. Sometimes that's, just not enough because, if the thing happens, even insurance or someone else being responsible is a poor consolation. So you want to reduce the risk to an acceptable level. What is an acceptable level is anything that you can take in stride. So it'll be different according to, whatever the risk is and to your situation, but whatever you can take in stride is acceptable as a risk. So you can reduce probability by prevention, and this is where we put in, security. Like we think, well, you know, don't let the hackers in, we put up the firewall. And then reduce the impact. So the difference between reducing probability and reducing impact here is I've got to keep the hackers off my network so they don't get the credit card numbers. Reducing impact is not storing the credit card numbers. So if you're able to do both, you know, that's even better. And then spread of risk is something we'll talk about a little bit because it's an underappreciated tactic. And you already know what it is. You understand it because your mother explained it to you. She said, don't put all your eggs in one basket. So in IT, we call it a single point of failure. The supply chain calls it single vendor risk. So in the insurance industry, you can buy business interruption insurance so that if the only place that you can buy a certain part or product, if their factory burns down, you can have insurance for that, even though it's nothing happened to you directly. And that is what how you might cover off a single vendor risk in that context. I told you knew what this was because XKCD calls it dependency. And you've all seen the comic, I'm sure. So spread of risk would be having more than one of these little pillars propping things up. So if you're not managing mitigating risk, you're not managing it, you're just accepting it. So this is where it starts to get interesting because we're going to apply this to our supply chain for software. So software does have a particular kind of a supply chain. It has nothing to do with trucks moving boxes anymore, but we have a specific way of looking at it. And in most diagrams, it looks basically like this. Digital goods have a specific type of supply chain that gets from the developer who programs it all the way to the end user. So we split this up in sort of two areas. We look at source integrity and build integrity. So you can kind of recognize what's happening with actually developing the software as the source, and then what happened in assembly distribution. So we can actually group these into four areas. So we have source threats, build threats, usage threats, and dependency threats. This is how we sort of break down the supply chain to look at different risks that can occur. So you have attack vectors here, 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 and they just pop in like that. There are all these different areas that you need to ensure are secured. So these are a whole bunch of different kinds of attacks that can come against the supply chain, and we are seeing a lot of talk about the software supply chain and the different attacks that have occurred. So for example, the long con is doesn't normally appear on these types of diagrams or slides because it's a difficult one to deal with. But yes, I'm thinking of the XZ hack, and I say XZ because we're in Canada. So
XE utils, is that the one?
yeah. So and those are very difficult because the attacker was able to play the long game and gain a position of trust. So those are hard to deal with, but they're not impossible. What's missing from those diagrams is single vendor risk. And as of a year ago, people started looking at WordPress.org as a single vendor risk for where we obtain our software updates. And the thing about supply chains is that they hate uncertainty. And this is something that we have had a lot of in the past year. an uncertain scenario, risk is just hard to quantify. So whether that's legal actions or the potential of having your supply chain cut off, as happened to one host, or even innocently through outages or anything like that. Having only one vendor becomes a risk to 43% of the internet.
Mhm.
And it's not just WordPress, so not picking on WordPress, because this just happened in the Ruby community, where the Ruby Central sort of asserted control over Ruby gems. But you can already bypass that, because this is how the internet responds to that sort of thing. So centralized repositories, centralized attacks. If all the gold is in Fort Knox, that's where all the break-ins are, or attempted. So so in this case, we're looking at the NPM attacks, and here GitHub stepped in and did some hardening to the supply chain, even though they weren't the primary attack vector. Some of the attacks were using GitHub Actions, and so GitHub stepped in and made some improvements there. And as of last month, it's almost a dozen groups signed a joint letter saying, hey, it's pretty expensive to run these repositories, and this can't be sustainable. So I wanted to be really clear about this one, because people already talked about it a little bit as the tragedy of the commons, but don't be fooled, because this is a centralization risk. Like this is a centralization problem. It's not a it's not the tragedy of the commons, because that is still the biggest myth affecting open source software. So yeah, we're looking for a little reassurance, a little bit more certainty. So let's go back to our supply chain, and remember all the different areas. So we have certain tactics that we can use in each of these areas to harden the supply chain. But WordPress has a very different kind of supply chain, and you can see here we've got two extra steps in the build stage, where we've got the plugin review team, which that's all of the packages, plugins, and themes, and we've got the official Subversion repo, which cases that separate from whatever developers are doing on their own, because developers prefer GitHub or Git or wherever they're using. Nobody really likes XVN, so this is the way it is. Result is that we end up having two repositories for each package that is distributed, and all of that's internal to .org. So we have the same threats and the same attack vectors, but now we have more surface area, because we've got two different repositories now that could be attacked for the same package. So this sort of spreads out the risk, but it's still in the same chain, so it doesn't give you the benefits of spreading risk. And so the issue here is that we get a bit of I lost where I was. Right, so the attack vectors that we've added don't really have reliable safeguards, or they are opaque, because this is all internal to .org. And so there are, some people within our community that have much more insight into this than, the average person or anybody that's sort of outside that may be relying on it, but don't really know to be able to say, yes, I trust that level of security. So where did we get this, or how did we come up with this? Is really more of a when question. So if we go back to, around 2004, which we talked about a little bit in that session this morning. So back then, software was on centralized sites. So you went to tucows.com or you went to download.com or whatever, and that's where you download all your software. And you probably did it with an FTP client, which sends your password in plain text, because this was the early 2000s and people were going, oh, well, probably no one noticed. Times have changed. So subversion was dominant right up until 2010 as for source code management. Agile, which most of us in the dev world are very familiar with, and it's just kind of the normal way to run a project. It hadn't really gotten traction. We're still using waterfall methodologies. And those kind of reflect the systems that are designed for the cathedral rather than the bazaar. This was an issue. So what we had there was the so I'm getting ahead of myself. Broadband use was just passing dial-up, and logging was in the zeitgeist. So looking to when B2 came, or WordPress came out of B2, and this is the part we covered a little bit this morning. First release, May 2003. Plugin support, official plugin repository, January 2005. And theme support in February. And then the official plugin directory. So this is early 2005 was when we had that. And really, this was great at the time, because there was really no, the community was, a fraction, a very small fraction of what it is now. And it was hard to find plugins or themes that you wanted to use. So you just had to, and you didn't know which ones were better or worse, or should I trust this one or not. And so, in those days, I would be looking for, if I was looking for a theme, I might, I might look around and go, oh, okay, well, here's one that by Brian Gardner. I know who that is. And, I'm just going to use his themes. So that's basically how I would learn to write themes, is, dissecting how he built them. But you had to kind of know a little bit about the community, and you had to know where to find stuff, and it was very difficult. So that kind of Wild West was kind of brought gradually to a close by people gradually moving into .org as the official source for all of the plugins and themes, and you could trust it. So in those days, that was something really needed, and out of necessity, it was all centralized. So the question is, can we decentralize it without reintroducing the Wild West? Spoiler, yes, we can. So how do you respond? So say, nothing's always an option. Usually not the best one. Maybe it's fine. Maybe it's not fine. Because doing nothing would be accepting risk.
Yeah.
And we have a number of different risks. The fact that we've got a larger surface area for attacks, we've got some opaque protection, or we don't know, and the biggest one, single vendor. So as of a year ago, Spirepress was founded by Sarah Savage, who had this idea to do federated independent repositories, and just have them, anybody could, set up a mirror or set up their repos and list their packages, to be distributed. So started work on it, and that's when I found the group, and not founded, but I found the group. And what I found was people asking the right questions, which is far more important than people with the right answers, because you're going to get more ideas, and you're going to get, people working out the kinks together, and you're going to get a group. Because at the time, there were a lot of people saying, I mean, most of you remember this, it's not that long ago. It's we had a lot of people saying, oh, here's how you run your own mirror, here's how you would do this and that. But nobody's really offering to do it for you. It's just, oh, here's some tools. It's like, oh, just set up a mirror. There's 60,000 packages, by the way. Just, yeah, but here's the code. You can, run it yourself. Well, it's not really practical for most people. So the difference here was Spirepress was building a suite of software tools and standing up infrastructure. Because the idea was, let's not just have a mirror, let's make it a public mirror. Anybody can use this. And we worked with Fastly on that. So they were a big partner early. So as I got involved with the Spirepress project, I don't know, I opened my mouth one time too many or something, and I ended up managing project managing big parts of it. But the development has been done by mostly other people, and we've had a good group there. But we launched version 1.0 as of June 6th in Basel, right around the time of WordCamp EU. And at the same time, early this year, talks sort of started just quietly and online in different corners about coming up with a new solution. And it was very much the same thing or very similar to what Spirepress vision was. And so we kind of naturally got involved with those discussions. And FAIR was born out of that. The Federated and Independent Repositories was formed under the Linux Foundation, which has around 1,000 projects. So they've got a little bit of experience in knowing how to put together a project with good governance and oversight, and that's what we wanted, because we wanted to move quickly, and the Linux Foundation said what guidance in that. So a coordinated announcement took place in Basel at the same event, and that launched the FAIR plugin for technical independence, which used the Spirepress servers with their mirror, so that you could download everything through FAIR and Spirepress that you could from WordPress.org. And a couple of weeks later, it was announced at the Open Source Summit in Denver.
Yes.
And response to that was overwhelmingly positive. Both from within the WordPress community and from a surprising number of groups and organizations, people outside what we call our community. So non-WordPress users said, hey, that's great. We love what you're doing. So working together to decentralize and federate, and the approach is for Fair and Aspire Press. Um, to, essentially, I'm saying disruptive potential because we are looking to make some significant changes in the way that we think about distributing software. Um, and the fair approach was creating a general protocol with WordPress specific application to it. So in the general application of the protocol, it can be used really to distribute any kinds of digital goods. And I keep using the example of the EPUBs. Maybe you've got a whole group of writers that love to write science fiction and they just want to share their EPUB files so that they can read what each other is writing. That would work under this sort of protocol in a general sense. But because we are primarily looking at WordPress right now, we have some, a lot of specific WordPress specific extensions to the protocol that really address the way that WordPress needs things distributed. So it's similarly, it's a suite of tools that are released under the MIT and GPL licenses. So back on our supply chain, we okay, supply chain with our three areas that we're looking at. Three different types of things that we can do to help secure a supply chain. But remember, the WordPress supply chain is a little bit different. So when we're going back to this kind of a model, plus doing it in a distributed fashion, we needed to move some things, and we needed to add some things in order to provide the additional layers of security that you could potentially lose by decentralizing. So the decentralizing is made much safer by adding some types of security that we have never had in WordPress. And some of them are ones that we have talked about for, in some cases, years in WordPress about, oh, we should have this. But it's just kind of never come up as the priority with so many other things that are being done in WordPress core. So what we did then was we said, okay, well, we need to make a stronger connection between the original software and the end user. So we tightened that connection so that when the end user website installs the software, they know that it is a bit for bit copy of exactly what they requested. So even if it was cached or stored somewhere in between, it is digitally signed with a crypto signature so that you can verify that it's the right thing that you received. And how does that work? So decentralized architecture. We add some stuff to the package. So as I said, it's signed. It uses a decentralized ID so that we can always refer canonically to the same package. It's got a provenance document that has attestations that the developer could make about the package, and many of these can be verified. So the DID can be verified if you have set up a domain alias for it, and that's already in FAIR. So as I kind of go into this part of the talk, I want to be cautious not to overstate what is there today versus the things that we're working on. But it's important that I sort of present the direction that we're going with it. So so a lot of this is in place. A lot of it is underway, and some of it is future plans. So I may not always point out which one is which, but we'll can clarify. So so aggregators like Aspire Cloud can point users to all the available packages. And these can appear right in your WordPress dashboard, just the same way that you've always looked for plugins and themes. And it can do all of the checks to verify that what the publisher has said about the package is accurate. So you verify the checksums and all of the different things that, and say, yeah, this looks good. We can do some code scanning. So there's a lot of these checks that are being done on .org now, and Matt talked about some of them this morning, but looking at the same approach. So we've already got a good list of things that are checked for in the WordPress repo, and we can use the same ones and extend them. So distributed repositories, every publisher of a package gets to choose where they are hosting their code. I feel that's important. And that's the decentralized part. So you're in control of, this is the canonical version. This is the only canonical version. And this is where I want it hosted. So if you like, GitLab over GitHub or whatever, or if you want to self-host and run Git or so there's a list of ones that are currently supported and likely plans to extend those. And again, installation comes directly from the canonical source, and is the signatures are validated before the install happens. So whatever else happens, so we can assign trust, examine the trust signals and apply a label and say, yeah, we trust this package. But after all of that, at the end of the day, if the signature doesn't match, the install gets aborted because you can't be sure. There's not a lot of certainty that you can, like, nobody really wants to put down 100% on a lot of these assurances, but this one, the signature, you can validate. So that gets the right to override any of the other trust signals that we were looking at. So labeling packages is something that we looked at Blue Sky. And when I say we, a lot of this refers to Ryan over here, who's done a lot of this work in writing the specs. And Mika Epstein has written a good chunk of this part of the spec as well. So so we looked at how Blue Sky does it and said, well, this is a good model. And they've got some protocols for dealing with it. And so we can just sort of appropriate that for a version for FAIR. So for example, we could have a community labeler, which provides additional information beyond what FAIR provides. So there's just like with Blue Sky, there's a hard-coded sort of a trust labeler that everybody gets from FAIR. And then everything else after that, you could choose to subscribe to. So if you wanted to subscribe to a CVE list, you could potentially do that. And if that provider gave you an API for a free version or paid version, you could put in your API key and upgrade and get a different level of service, perhaps. So this is the sort of architecture that we've envisioned, and for that there could be any number of providers, but in particular, just in a couple of weeks, we'll be doing a hackathon at CloudFest in Miami, where we're going to start building this with PatchStack, who is sponsoring. So we're going to start building this piece to allow your WordPress dashboard, or some means of seeing whether our CVEs listed. Do third-party things like we didn't collaborate on this, but meets WCAG 2.2. So if you wanted to provide a label like that, you could do that as a third party and say, different ways of categorizing all the packages. So if that was a requirement for you, you could filter that. Or just sort of general curating lists. So if you have a trusted reviewer of plugins, you could have him, give you a thumbs up or thumbs down, and the idea there is if you wanted, you could configure it to not install anything that gave you a thumbs down. So it's got to get at least 3 stars from Hank, or you don't install it. So this is how we implement a trust model. And yeah, I'm going to try and start talking faster, but so digital trust is a big deal. The Web of Trust map is globally, it's identified thousands of different projects that are working on this particular problem. How do you verify trust or identity online? And in Canada alone, I don't know why it's not loading, but the picture is right. So we've got, and there's even the Digital ID and Authentication Council of Canada, which, until I started digging in here, I didn't realize we had that. So I don't know, maybe they need a little more marketing, but it's all of these people being concerned and working with the problem of how to establish trust digitally. So here again, we have sort of how I conceptualize our trust model. So we've got our package, and we've got the different attestations that the publisher could make, as well as different things that we can run checks on and say, well, does it do this and does it have that, and is this secure? And so one of the things is the SBOM, which the SBOM is these software bill of materials. So in a software package, you might have different libraries or components that ship together with it, and that's what this refers to. In the EU's Cyber Resilience Act, these SBOMs are a requirement that will be coming into effect sooner than we probably realize, because unless you've been following it, and if you haven't started towards it, you're behind. So this is something that we said, well, we can put in the ability to verify that those are present. And then we did the various checks, so code scans, all of that. So then we calculate a trust score, apply a label, using criteria that are also used in a number of other places. So OpenSSF scorecard to WordPress.org. Symphony has a program. There's the Open Code has a badge program. A lot of people are doing this kind of scoring assessment. So we look at the same kinds of checks they're doing to validate that best practices are being followed. So over the length of the time that WordPress has been running, things have changed. We structure software projects differently. So we've gone from waterfall to agile. We organize our development teams differently. Now we are, not in cubicles, we are online and asynchronous and decentralized. We do source code management differently. We've gone from CBS to Subversion to now Git. And we even use software differently. So does anybody have actually installed a copy of Microsoft Office? We don't do that. So this gives an opportunity. We should distribute software differently. with the opportunity to democratize the publishing of software. And this is brought about through decentralization. So why the future will be federated, distributed is the natural healthy state of the internet, has always been. This, don't expect you to read it, it's just there if you want to download the slide later. But David Weinberger in 2001, I think, described this as, this is how package routing works. It's basically like if you wanted to drive from New York to San Francisco and you did it by driving from one gas station to another and asking directions at every one. And each gas station will tell you, well, yeah, I don't really know, but if you go to that gas station and ask again, you'll be closer. And it turns out that that actually is more efficient and it's more robust. Because if you had a centralized spot for all of the package routing of the internet, one hiccup would bring down the whole system. So it's more robust now. And that's by design. Tim Berners-Lee talks about this being very decentralized. And he says that feeling of individual control and then empowerment is something we've lost. And this is important because for me, this is a Web3 thing. Web3 is just the web rediscovering its roots. Web 2 was silos and monolithic Twitter and Facebook and all of these silos. Web 3 is just saying, oh, that's not how it was supposed to be. Let's get back to what we meant. Secondly, web has always been a starfish and not a spider. With a spider, a spider is a WYSIWYG organism. What you see is what you get. You got a head, you got a body, and some legs. You cut off the head and it dies. It's very straightforward. But a starfish is a decentralized organism. You can cut off its arm, you can cut it in half, and you'll end up with two starfish. And that is the beauty of a decentralized organism or a decentralized organization. And the harder that you fight a decentralized organization, the stronger it gets. So this is like the Hydra in Greek mythology. You cut off a head and two more grow in its place. And if you don't believe the analogy, ask the recording industry about how they shut down Napster and then there was no more music sharing anymore. Because that worked out so well.
Can you wrap it up, please, Chris?
Yes.
We're waiting on the main plenary as well, so there's a
Okay.
last wrap up that.
All right, so decentralization brings zero network value. The network value is something that you may have thought of this as Moore's law and stuff, but Beckstrom's law actually provides an economic calculation to the value of a network. But if it's decentralized, there is no network to value. Network economics says that when everyone supplies part of the network, the costs are also shared. So when we're saying that it's not sustainable to have all these centralized distribution, well, if everybody supplies a piece of a decentralized network, you've solved a huge piece of the cost problem. So I have to quote Linus because he keeps talking about get here. And the reason that he refused to use CBS or SVN was because it was not distributed. And the Linux kernel development was distributed. So he wrote get for that reason. And lastly, it's time. The innovation tends to happen when the time is right. And when you see a whole bunch of people working on the same thing from different angles, you know it's coming time. And that's what we see with the digital trust work that are being done.
You make a final statement, please.
All right.
This does have to end now. Sorry.
Ethos of the open web is decentralized. And final slide. The future will not be centralized. So sorry, no time for questions, but find me or find Ryan or Courtney and happy to talk.
Thank you, Brent. The plenary or the last session